Hello and welcome back to Finding Your Stride. I'm Brandon Handy. Today our special guest is Dr. Jill Siler. Dr. Siler is the superintendent at Gunter ISD. She's also a professor at the University of North Texas, and she's the recent author of Thrive Through the Five. Dr. Siler, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited and thankful to have you on our show today. For our audience out there today, our topic of discussion is the evolution of the principal. Over time, it's kind of grown and changed and adapted, and there seems to be another big change coming. And so we're really thankful to have you on, like I said, to talk about this topic today. So my first question for you is, like I said, it seems to be the administrator position is kind of at a turning point. And traditionally, people think of a school administrator as a person who's responsible for budgeting and student discipline and the overall management of the school, students, and teachers. However, it kind of seems that there's a shift coming in the duties and responsibilities of an administrator. And this change is important to not only administrators, but to how teachers will view the administrator position. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and how the changes are coming about for teachers and administrators in this turning point?
Absolutely. And the first thing I would say is that we're seeing this change everywhere across the system, from our assistant principal and that role to our principal, to everyone in central office, all the way up to the superintendency. And so obviously I had that perspective too, but you start to see a significant shift in that role too. And I think that just is just reflective of what we're seeing across the entire system. The other thing I think is important to know, Brandon, is that it's not just a shift, like we used to do this and now we need to do this. It's an and, right? So everything that those principals were responsible for in terms of budgeting and discipline and just, you talked about the overall management of the school building, all of that's still in place. But on top of it is this critical piece of understanding what quality teaching and learning looks like and how to move instructional practice forward in a building. There's significant pressure for all of our positions and specifically the principals on our campuses to be that instructional leader. And it's a different look than it was 15, 20 years ago.
So why is this shift happening now? It seems like it's, the state of Texas has recently switched over the principal certification exam. And if people don't know that, it's no longer certified as a principal. It's certified as an instructional leader, or a principal as an instructional leader. So why is this shift happening now?
I think it's just essential for kids, right? We know that old models of leadership were not enough. We know that all students were not learning at the rate that they needed to be learning at. And so, you talked about the principal exam, but also the principal evaluation system has also shifted as well. So when you look at TPES, which is, our state's version of the principal evaluation, it is very much aligned to that instructional leadership competencies that are reflected on that test, but you're seeing at our universities levels, as well as they're preparing principals. That instructional piece is so important. It's not just enough to run a good school. It's not enough for our teachers just to love on kids. It never has been. But I feel like we are getting much better with our assessment and our understanding of teaching and learning, and expectations are continuing to rise because we need all kids to be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for a lot of people to understand, that is that this all comes back to the students, and it's about what we can do to support them. And for our listeners out there who are teachers and don't know, TPES is, that evaluation system for principals. It's very similar to T-TEST, and that it's really targeted towards growth and development of the individual. And it's not like a gotcha moment or a rating system like that. It's meant to help grow the individual. And just as teachers grow and develop, administrators have to grow and develop.
Absolutely. And just a note on that, because I think what you brought up was so important. Our old systems of evaluation were so compliance based, and we saw this radical shift with T-test to this growth model where you have the upper ends of that evaluation, right? That accomplish and distinguish being areas that you want to strive towards, areas that you might visit in one specific area or another, but probably not a place where every single teacher hits distinguish in every single category. They truly built it on a growth model. The principalship is the same way. And so when you look at that TPES system, it gives our instructional leaders a framework of this is what it should look like on my campus.
Yeah, and that's really excellent because, like you said, moving from that compliance model to that growth model, that in itself was a large shift in the educational community, and I think that's important to recognize that. On another note, though, I was thinking about this. A lot of schools have instructional coaches or other instructional leadership positions. Why do you feel the administrator needs to be more involved in the instructional leadership position as opposed to these others or in addition to these other people?
Yeah, well, let me first just say a word to our instructional coaches and all of those instructional support positions of how critical that they are. I shared at the beginning of this interview that the role of the principal has not changed in the sense of the things that they have to do. It's just only expanded, right? So when you think about the weight that's on our principal's plate in terms of something happens to one of our students and it requires a full investigation, something is accused of one of our adults and it requires a full investigation, all of the lunch duties, every single RTI 504, all of those meetings that our principals have to be at, their time is so precious. And so while we can talk about in a perfect world, our principals need to be in classrooms every single day, for portions of the day, some days that's not even possible. So I think that those positions are critical. I think that we see principals advocating for them more often. And then in terms of the principal's role of supporting that, it's critical. When principals are in the place where they're making decisions about what staff development looks like on their campuses, they cannot do that without a pulse on what the instruction looks like in their classrooms. And so it's critical that they take the lead in that.
I like how you talked about it as being almost like an additional layer of support. It's not replacing, and for anybody who is an instructional coach or an instructional leader on their campus who is a support personnel, it's not a replacement of them. It's an additional layer. And then, you and your administrator will be working together to, make those goals of helping students in every way possible. And it's just another layer to ensure that instructional leadership is where it needs to be.
Absolutely.
So how do you think this shift is going to affect the schools, all the different schools' culture?
Yeah, so I think when you think about culture, which is so important, the crux of that comes down to purpose, right? Why are we here? Why are we doing the work that we're doing? And I think as educators, we come into this profession with this innate love for our kids and this innate love for our content. And so I think it really changes the school culture in that everyone knows what they're about, which is educating our kids at the highest level, creating an environment where they feel loved and supported, and that they come out being better human beings.
Mm-hmm. You had said something earlier that when we're thinking about administrators coming into this, and they have a lot on their plate already, and a lot of people are struggling with that. What would you say to an administrator that is resistant to this change?
I would say that learning to prioritize time is critical. Understanding where the priority is and taking care of that. And the priority is always the people, right? It's the people in the building, young and not so young, and taking care of their needs, right? But sometimes that means staying after hours to take care of some of that paperwork so that you can be out in person, out in front. In terms of what I would say to the person who was resistant to the change, I would just say that the future will be limited, right? If you're in a place sitting as an assistant principal and instructional leadership is not your forte, and you're not willing to embrace that and learn what you need to learn to excel in that area, the AP role may be the terminal role for you. Like it may not be able to go further than that. Few and far between are the positions that allow you to lead in the school environment that do not have some sort of focus on instruction.
Mm-hmm. This isn't just happening in Texas. This is happening all across the nation. We're seeing this shift. And I think that is another important key for people to understand, that when an instructional leader, when you're placed in that role as an administrator, you're expected to grow and develop just like a teacher is, and just like we expect our students to grow and develop. And you kind of have to be receptive to that change. So on our show, we kind of like to highlight keys to success and growth. What are 2 key actions that you could recommend to an administrator that might help them be successful in this shift?
Yeah, I think that learning is just first and foremost, and we need to be drivers of that learning. It is on us, even if we're sitting in a role, even if it's an assistant principal and our role is very limited to a specific area, we have to be the drivers of our learning. And so whether that is leading or starting a book study with some teachers on our campus, having dialogue around what quality, assessment looks like, or just, the curriculum or the lessons, whatever that looks like, engaging in that and diving deep. It means taking time out to visit classrooms. And if we're not 100% comfortable on what we think we should be seeing or whatnot, to bring other people with us and to start conversation around that, always in a supportive way of the instructor, but that's really important. The second thing that I just would encourage anyone who is just trying to broaden their experience base would be to get involved in curriculum development, in just understanding what scope and sequence looks like, and the different pieces that we have to incorporate, and what that guaranteed and viable curriculum looks like. That is a piece of my experience I'm so thankful for, and I think that every principal or aspiring administrator needs to have some sort of experience with that.
Yeah. And I think also to incorporate into those same keys, earlier you mentioned time management. I think that's a really critical part of this too, because people feeling like they have so much on their plate already, being able to account for that time and making sure there's not, dead time or time wasted in it. It's much like a teacher, you have to plan out every minute of your day. And I think the, an administrator role is very similar in that respect.
And the only thing I'd add to that, Brandon, is you're so right. The prioritization part is extremely important. But at the end of the day, just like a teacher experiences this as well, comes in with the best laid plans and then X happens. For a principal, it is that times 100,000. No one can dictate what's going to happen on a certain day. And so it's, keeping the main thing, and finding pockets of time. It's scheduling time. It's using your calendar to your benefit. It's doing as many things proactively to help give yourself time and space to do that kind of work. But at the same time, understanding that the job is the job and the needs always come first, which may take your best laid plan and throw it out the window for that day.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for people who are considering what you just said to plan and have that flexibility to feel like you are able to move things still. So
absolutely.
I think that's great. Kind of on the flip side of this coin, this is going to mean some big changes for teachers as well. Support and feedback from their administrator, for teachers who are nervous or apprehensive about this. What are some recommendations that you have for teachers so they can be more successful in working with their administrator?
Yeah, so great question. And, you framed it in terms of what can we tell our teachers and help our teachers. But I would start with this first, that from the principal standpoint, whether it's in an AP role or in the principal role or any role at the leadership level, the relationships and the trust that have to be built and cared for is critically important. And until that happens, the level of effectiveness that your feedback that you're giving your teachers is going to be limited. And so I would just lay that encouragement down for your leaders, is that if you're not in a culture where that is common, those relationships and that trust has to be built in order for it to be effective. For our teachers, one of the things that I look for in my principals and in my leaders, just one of those critical characteristics is reflectiveness and self-awareness. And so we are all going to make mistakes. And if we're not, we're playing it way too safe in our comfort zones. And so what I want to know is, how aware are you of your surroundings and the choices and the decisions and the prioritizations that you're making? But then also, how reflective are you with that? And the same is true for our teachers. We have to be reflective in our craft and be open to feedback, be open to thinking about things that people are saying to us. And so those are the two things that I would just encourage teachers, is that all of our goal is the same, which is to support kids and have them learn at the highest levels. So how can we as teachers and leaders be reflective about our practice, about our craft, about our leadership in the classroom and at the campus level to make that happen?
Yeah, that was really well said. And I think the fact that it starts at the administrative level and builds off of those relationships is really important. I think a good, solid foundational relationship is important to have with the administrator, so you can grow and develop as a teacher. I think that's so important.
Yeah, for sure.
Dr. Siler, thank you so much for being with us today. For everybody listening out there, this is a 2-part episode. Dr. Siler will be with us back again next week. We're going to just be discussing her new book coming out. Dr. Siler, what's the name of your new book?
So the new book is called Thrive Through the 5. It launches Labor Day weekend. You can find more information about the book or follow me online at jillmsiler.com or any social media platform at jillmsiler.
That's great. And we're going to be highlighting a specific section of your book next week. We're going to be talking about decision making. So we're really excited about that. And to our listeners out there, next week on Wednesday, tune back in and hear our next episode for part 2 of Dr. Jill Siler. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Finding Your Stride. I'm Brandon Handy, and I hope to help you find your stride today.